fact, according to Emily Durkheim, insofar as it takes into recognition other people. So the other people who are in the relationship with you, they may not even be physical. I gave you also the example of somebody who is dressing in his or her room, and the way you choose your dress that day, you begin to imagine how people are going to receive your dress. Would they applaud you? Would they condemn you? Would they pass sarcastic comments on your dress? Would they say, yes, you are neatly dressed, I appreciate you, that kind of thing. So a fact is a fact that is generated as a result of interaction. So again, if you want to understand deviance, you want to understand crime, you want to understand disturbances, disobedience, delinquency, or truancy, all of it can be understood from the point of view of the relationship that has created the situation that you see that situation, that fact. So you should be able to say that social fact is created because of the relationship that exists between people. And here we say social because we are sociologists, we're not psychologists. An individual can be studied by psychologists. Sociologists study people in groups. So it's that group that generated the facts. The group labels people, and it becomes a fact, and so on and so forth. So question 6, I said before that sociology is the study of interrelationships between social institutions, and that these interrelationships should be regarded as universal social interconnections. Who said this? And we said it's Auguste Comte. And then explain what he meant. And I said they should say that these institutions or interconnections are referring to all the common things you find in human society. Okay? You find marriage, you find family, you find religion, you find politics, you find economy. And so the relationship between economy, religion, education, culture, all these are interrelated. So you want to explain what this means is to say that every human society has these institutions, and that these institutions are all interrelated. There's no way from the functionalist point of view that you will see that society can work well if the family institution is destroyed. There's no way society will work well if there are no jobs or employment for people to find money and meet their basic needs. There is no society will also go well if religion is misplaced and abused and misused. So these are the things you should be able to explain. The fact that they are universal means that they are important to human coexistence, but they must play constructive interrelationships for society to advance. Don't forget that for society to make progress, there has to be some level of stability. So that takes me to this summary of some of the other things we talked about. That sociology itself can be studied from the qualitative, interpretative sense and quantitative sense or statistical sense, where you make inferences based on calculations and so on. We say that in doing sociology, you need to know the methods, and the methods are related to whether you use survey to collect data or you use archives to collect data, or any of those methods that we have listed as essential to sociology. Now, remember also that we have had several discussions that touch on things like science, and science has characteristics, and the characteristics of science, both in the natural and the social world, are the same, and that there is order, there's comparison, there's repeatability, there is systematism, and all of that characterize science. And so when you bring that into the study of sociology using any of these, whether document method or whether survey method or archives, or as the case may be, all of them need to follow scientific procedure. And we do that. We follow scientific procedure in generating our knowledge. So it's very, very important. We also talked about group dynamics. Group dynamics tell us things about the interrelationship between groups of people. It may be classes of people, it may be ethnic, it may be religious, it may be political parties, whatever those interrelationships or those groups are. The way they relate is dynamic. How people related religious-wise in Nigeria in the 60s and 70s have completely changed in the 21st century. It used to be cordial. Now it is no more cordial between especially Christians and Muslims. In some countries, it is between the dominant religions. Here in Nigeria, Christians and Muslims. And so the dynamics spans into things like inter-ethnic relationships, relationship between different ethnic groups. It used to be wonderful before, but it's now very chaotic, where people don't even allow their children to intermarry if they are not from the same tribal group or ethnic group. And then, of course, how about classes? Social classes, where Karl Marx said that society is divided into two classes, those that have and those that don't have. And those that don't have, they fight those that have. Those that have, they control and dominate those that don't have. And that makes life very, very difficult. Over the months and years, since we entered this century, we've seen several happenings in Nigeria. Conflict, killings, and all of those things. They are all class related, because either you are, in terms of religious divide, either you are a Muslim or you are a Christian. And in terms of economic power, either you have money or you don't have money. In terms of tribal affiliations, you are either from, one tribe or the other. And then if you look at it from regional point of view, either from the north or from the south. If you look at it from the geopolitical zone, you're either northeast or north-south, or northwest, or south-south, or southeast, or southwest, or north-central. These are all the groups that interrelate, Then you are either male or female. That's another dimension when you start studying gender. And again, in political parlance, you're either in the PDP or you're in APC. These are the two dominant political parties in Nigeria. So it's an interesting sphere of our study to look at the current state of intergroup relationships. Then, of course, we'll say that these intergroup relationships are direct reflections of the social structure of society. In other words, society itself is a mirror reflecting diversity of people, diversity of interests, diversity of classes, because Max Weber, he did a major study on classes and said they are not just two classes. In the upper class, you have a lot of other levels of the upper class people. In the middle class, you have a lot of other subclasses of people. In the lower class, you also have several subclasses. A lower class person is not necessarily poor, right? So those are the analysis, very beautiful analysis by Max Weber. Now, so again, what I'm trying to tell you that there are so much of entities you can identify in society when you look at the social structure of a typical society. In other words, you have people who if you look at gender, for example, there are men, there are women, there are also people who believe they are transgender, there are people who believe that they are lesbians, that they are queer, and so on and so forth. The LGBT movement in the United States and parts of the world today is challenging the dominant thinking that an individual is either male or female. So the social structure of society tells you the sorts of arrangement that exists, the composition of people, the composition of interests, the composition of classes, and that the advancement of society comes only when there is some level of understanding between these classes. So it's fundamental for us to appreciate that. Then, of course, I said there are three major theoretical perspectives in the study of sociology. One is functionalism, and functionalism talks about harmony, and that's why I was saying that it is believed that society will not make progress without some level of stability, and that comes from creating scenarios, creating structures that promote equity, that promote unity, that promote harmony, and therefore ensuring that each part depends on the other for meaningful growth and development. Then you have the conflict perspective that looks at or examines the thinking and the belief that society is pregnant with conflict. Society is full of conflict. And the basis of this conflict is the fact that there is injustice and unequalness and what we call inequality between different strata of society. And that society does not make progress until these contradictions are resolved. And that the engine force of such advancement is the conflict that exists between these groups. And so from moment to moment, these conflicts emerge that help to, create the engine force for readjustment, for restructuring, for reforms, for changes, that will result in better relationship among classes. Then, of course, you have what is called the symbolic interactionism method, the SI method. The SI method talks about symbols. And we said before that material culture is about symbols, about totems, about objects, about artifacts. And that even in terms of personal relationships, we'll find that symbols are used, expressions, gestures, movements of the body, they call it body language. They are all supposed to indicate something. So if you don't belong to the group or a group of people that use tattoos to communicate, that you will not understand. In prison, for example, or in correctional facilities, I would say nowadays, you find that people are not able to understand society, their society, the correctional community, if you don't really understand the symbols that they use. If you have watched prison breaks before or jail breaks, you will see a lot of the thinking that goes on that informs some sort of communication, between those who are up doing something. Now, so that's very important for for our understanding that even our cultures are supposed to be symbolic expressions of what we believe, but that we must find common meanings. We call it shared meaning to all the symbols, the gestures, and so on. That's the only way we can understand each other at the interpersonal, intergroup relationship level to advance the development of society. So what we have tried to do here now is to say that the theoretical positions may have some overlap, and that for us to do very good sociology, we must begin to look at how the methodologies and theories overlap in different ways. And somebody is making noise in my class, please. And remember, I'm recording. Okay, thank you. So as if you want to be a good sociologist, or even if you want to use sociological method in your field to undertake analysis of any social issues, you must be able to see where there is an overlap between the functionalist and the conflict and the symbolic interactionist perspectives. These perspectives are not independently of each other. It's just looking at different sides of the same issue. So you need to create an understanding within yourself that if you say society, because it's pregnant with conflict and there's nothing that can happen, we know the consequences of that. So we know that if a society, a community is embroiled in conflict all the time, nobody wants to come and invest there. Yeah, insecurity drives away investors. So it's very important to then say that we need to connect that. If there is a conflict situation today, we should be able to resolve that conflict situation through amicable means. And where amicable means fail, then of course you find conflict ways now coming to interfere in the process. And of course, you know there will be deaths, you know there will be migration, you know there will be people who will move away from where the conflict is. So there's need to therefore employ all the necessary tools in terms of our relationship. Please, can you switch off? Can you audio off, please? So on that basis, there is need to also come to an understanding. If you are doing a sociological analysis, you need to also understand that symbols are very important, whether you are a conflict person or you are a functionalist person. If you go to a particular place and people behave in a particular way, you need to understand their language. You need to understand the gestures. Among many people in Nigeria, if you spread your 5 fingers on somebody's face, he knows you are insulting him. In another community somewhere in the world, may not be. So it's very important to then see how these areas can be married together to have a proper understanding of society. Now, I'd like to remind you that socialization is very important. There are 3 phases of it: primary, secondary, and tertiary phases. We have explained what all that means. We've talked about norms, we talked about values, and all that is in my syllabus for this semester. So now, although these review questions I have taken might actually be very crucial, certainly some other topics that we covered after the midterm, I might reflect them in the way the questions will be set, either in combination or even in alone. In other words, you might find a question on sociological methods and tools, whether archive method, surveys, interviews, and questionnaire, or observations, which are participant and non-participant informed. And then, of course, we talked about the scope of sociology and the issues. This was one of the things I wanted to talk about last time. We started talking on ICT, and then our time went off. ICT has resulted in transformations, just like technology machinery did during the Industrial Revolution. That's what ICT has now done. In those days, in the days when ICT had not developed to this level, this class wouldn't be holding at this moment. You have to wait for me to come back to the country and hold the class, physical class. Now we're having an online class. And even in the online class, we're having different platforms to choose from. Like I said, I couldn't access Teams here, so we have to use Zoom. Now we have different options to pick from, So ICT is very, very important. And presently, there are a lot of institutional and global processes going on through what we call globalization. Globalization is reducing the whole world into a single village. And right now you're having certain markets, online markets that have been created, all right? You have Jumia, you have Amazon, you have anything you want to sell online, there's a platform for it. And people can have goods delivered to you right at the door of your house. So these are the things that are affecting our understanding of society and how to actually see a new sociology. Imagine, a new sociology is all about the impact of these forces in interpersonal relationships, in group relationships. Now, being alone and not being collectively together is an issue. Of course, you people remember at the beginning of this semester, you're all calling for, hey, we must meet, let's make a physical class. And the rule of the university says, no, when you are 50 and above, you cannot have physical class. It's all the desire to have physical contact. That it is still beneficial, all right, to have physical contact in class. So you can ask questions and have answers given to you. Online, good, as we're doing now, but then it's impersonal. You're not seeing me. I'm not seeing you. I don't know whether you're understanding what I'm saying. So these are the kind of things that technological advancement, including ICT revolutions, have come to affect. So is sociology still in the way that you saw it in 17th century, 18th century? Definitely not. That is new sociology. That's why it's called themes, right? You can pull up anything, and discuss how technology has affected, how globalization has affected it. And of course, terrorism, insecurity, environment, science and technology, human rights, these are all the issues that have impact today on our lives. There are changes. We must then begin to see new ways of interpreting these developments in the light of sociological knowledge. So thank you very much. I'd like to stop here. Next week, I'm going to actually be available online for you to ask any question if it's allowed. But because next week is revision week, so it's your week, it's your time. I don't need to interfere, but I'll be alive. I'll be around for you online to ask any questions. Thank you very much and enjoy Nigeria. I'll soon join you guys.
Thank you.
Bye. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Order 3. Okay, thank you very much. So the first question was to define sociology in your own words and briefly say how it relates to your people's culture. You must know who you are to be able to answer this question. Where perhaps there is no one that is less than 16 or less than 18 in this class, assuming you consistently went through secondary school as according to the policy. So by now you should know about your people. By now you should know how to describe your culture. By now you should be able to say how you think that sociology actually can help you to understand and to expand more on the knowledge of your culture. What are those practices? What are those experiences? What are the traditions, if you like, that are associated with your people? Your people are your tribal people, your ethnic people, your national people, if you like. And so first is to define sociology. When you define sociology in your own words, based on what we have treated, and of course, you know that we have treated varieties of perspectives on sociology. So you should be able to summarize in your mind, what is this discipline all about? The discipline is all about social interaction amongst people using the various institutions that have been created in society. These institutions are the ones that define our values. They define our norms. They define our outlook, our world outlook, how we perceive things, how we understand things, how we interpret things. So at this level, you should be able to say one or two things that you know about sociology. We said that institutions are created. These institutions help us to relate. Family, for example. You can also study culture. You can study marriage. You can study, every aspect of our life. Politics, the economy, you can study them. So you can see them. And if I recall, the very first one or two meetings we had in the course of this semester, I tried to say that if you look very well into your campus, even if you don't live there, you will see the representation of every institution of society there. You will see the government represented by the university administration. You will see economy represented by the shops, by the, those places where they sell one or two items. You can see law enforcement, social control. You can see it by the presence of the security of your university. And so the economy, the society, the law enforcement, even student union associations or government as you have, actually reflect, the political structure of society. So, and in various ways, you see heads of department, deans of faculties, you see class representatives, and all of them representing different arms of government. And this is very clear. So you should be able to interpret what you think sociology is and say it in your words. And then now tell me how your culture fits into your understanding of sociology. What can you say about your people, their manners, their ways of life, and all of that? So that's all I expected there. Remember that if you registered SOAP 101, you'll be expected, which is 2 credit load, you'll be expected to answer just 3 questions. And if you registered SOAP 121, which is 3 credit load, you're expected to answer 4 questions. So assuming you pick this question 1, that is how I want you to approach it. And then question 2 says, briefly describe how the European industrial revolutions, there are several of them, and the writings of social thinkers contributed to the emergence of sociology as a social science discipline. I have brought the 2 main factors that gave rise to the sociological discipline. One is industrial revolutions. And I posted a huge article on industrial revolution on the portal. I believe you have accessed that. So if you read, you see that there are in phases beginning from 17th century, 18th century, 19th century. Even now, societies are undergoing changes as a result of industrialization, as a result of technological advancement, as a result of social engineering, that is intercultural relationships. And so at the point where the Industrial Revolution took place was a meeting point between agrarian, simple hunting and gathering societies, and then the modern industrial society where machines were developed and employed to use to accomplish what humans were doing with their bare hands, in pre-industrial societies. If you remember, I said that the Industrial Revolution was not necessarily negative. It had positive contributions. For example, advancement in transportation, advancement in health, advancement in security, advancement even in urbanization in terms of housing styles and things like that. But for sociological reasons, these advancements through technological development led to several negative issues in society. And we said that many people who were engaged in the farming business had to lose their jobs because you can now do large-scale farming, which employs technology, or a lot of the machineries that were developed, became very useful at that time. So many people lost their jobs. Then so many people now had to go to the industrial cities to go and look for jobs, and they left the rural areas. And leaving rural areas meant they left their families behind. And as a result, there were so many problems that emanated from there. For example, the collapse of the family, where the family-headed structures didn't exist anymore. So it actually resulted in the collapse of morals and values in terms of the impact of communal living on society. And many people who were brought up collectively as children of the community, were no longer having elders supervising their growth, and so it became really problematic. Out of that came prostitution, drug abuse, and insecurity, crimes, deviance, and all forms of misdemeanors. So the result of that is a collapsed family, a collapsed society, where everyone who now comes to the city appear to be completely estranged to each other. The face-to-face relationships in the communal life disappeared. And so in the city, everybody minds their business. Everybody on their own. And even children are on their own, and the presence of large settlements actually contributed to this situation where individuals are so impersonal in their relationships. So that was very fundamental in creating questions in the minds of people. So Industrial Revolution actually negatively affected social development, social interaction, which we said is the core center of sociology. Second is writings of social thinkers, and we mentioned people like John Locke, we mentioned people like Ibn Khaldun, we mentioned Plato, we mentioned quite a number of them, particularly in the European continent. They were busy writing independently and raising questions about the trends that they saw as a result of industrialization. And industrialization led to urbanization. And of course, in between industrialization and urbanization or modernization is what we regard as technological advancement. So with these writers concerned in Europe, particularly in Germany, in France, and the United Kingdom, they all were writing about what they saw. So it was Auguste Comte, who lived between 1798 and 1857, that coined the word sociology to define it as the scientific study of society, its institutions, and interactions between these institutions and the values that define human living. So that's question 3 now. So question 3 said, who coined the word sociology? I just mentioned that it was Auguste Comte, and we saw his understanding, his perspective on the evolution of society and its institutions. So if, for example, if you go back a little bit, you recall we spoke about Ibn Khaldun as the actual person in North Africa who originally was writing so extensively on sociological issues, relationship, organic relationships, structural issues, community development, and all of that. He lived between 1332 and 1395. Now, but because of this unfavorable location, his ideas were not popularized. As such, he could not be regarded as the founding father of sociology. So then, of course, we talked about Max Weber, we talked about Karl Marx, we talked about Auguste Comte himself, and we talked about Herbert Spencer. These people in different ways contributed to understanding the social dynamics, social structure, and social change, that took place in the society at the time they were living. So now, question 3B says you should briefly describe what your choice in question 1, that is in question 3A, said is the focus or subject matter of sociology. Now, very cheap here. If you look at this question and go to question 6, it says sociology is the study of interrelationships between social institutions, and that these interrelationships should be regarded as universal social interconnections. And I said, who said this? Explain what he meant. The person that said this actually Auguste Comte. And what he meant is that there are universal interconnections between these institutions. And our understanding of sociology, of course, when I was discussing social dynamics and social structures and social change, we identified several institutions you find in society. In the course of this class, we have spoken the religion is universal. Social control is universal. So these are the institutes, whether they are traditional societies or they are small-scale societies, so they are large-scale societies, these institutions are universal in nature. So if I were like you, and I've read my notes and all the postings on the portal very well, you just see that I've given you 2 free questions that you can pick question 3 and then pick question 6, and you almost have the same material, the same issues, the same things, the same information answered them. Even though question 3A says you should identify who coined the word sociology. That's almost like a bonus, right? So if you pick Auguste Comte, then you'll be should be the focus of sociological understanding and study. And he said this are the fundamentals which define of sociology, the subject matter of sociology. And then question 4 says you define culture in sociology. This is also very simple to do. Culture is the way of life. Total way of life of a people. Then how do you identify the way of life of a people? If I were you, this is what I would ask myself. How do I identify the way of life of a people? You will do that through the knowledge of their culture, through the knowledge of their norms, through the knowledge of all the things that they present as specific people. We call intergroup relations. We have also covered intergroup relations extensively. And we said it's very fundamental. So, which means that sociological culture represents the total expression Hello? Say that my culture is divided into two, and that the two main types, so to speak, are matter culture and what they showcase, what objects of worship, that's the relationship with the supernatural world. That's you're in the realm of religion. Then, of course, you have other things like I was mentioning, tattoos. Then some objects which may carry spiritual connotations, such as those animal heads that you see people put on their farms. And you find things like in the gate, in the front of people's houses, you see something like a tiger's head or a lion's head, which are molded with cement and hard objects. And all of them are as symptoms or symbols, or they are the artifacts that represent the culture or the material culture of the people. Now, each of these cultural artifacts, cultural emblems, I'm using these different words to tell you that in some textbooks, you will see emblems, you will see artifacts, you will see tattoos, you will see that with in that regard. The physical aspect, you can identify them. You can go to places, you can see, the way people dress. Some people tie pieces of clothes on their head, on their chest, on their waist. Some people wear beads, neck chains, and other things like that. They all show the physical expression of the people. That's why I said, at this age where you are, whether you are 18, 19, 20, even 16, in the university, you should be able to identify some uniqueness about your people and be able to that culture that is similar with other people. That will still be some unique differences. Okay, so that's very important, and you should be able to identify by yourself. Now, the non-material aspect of culture are the things you don't see. Things like knowledge, things like education that is in that even define the material culture. So you briefly put it that way, that the non-material world defines the physical world. For example, how did it happen that somebody is creating a particular object to represent an action? Now, if you go to somebody's farm in the village, body putting something or creating something like the head of if you eat my groundnut, if you go to my farm and pluck my groundnut in my absence, that tree is standing there, something will happen to you, bad will happen to you to do that. Is to show you that there is a belief amongst the people that something bad is associated with that object, that object is harmful. Okay. Now, is it true? So, whether that is created to just make people not to steal, or that actually there's some divine power or force behind it that could harm someone, it's left to you. It's left to the people. But because it's sociological, we are able to track this to see that children are brought up. Of course, remember we have talked about socialization, right? At the primary stage, children 0 to about 6 years, they might be brought up to believe that there is actually something evil that can happen if you touch that man's groundnut in his absence with that thing standing on his farm. At the secondary phase of socialization, 7 to early adulthood, you won't be able to see anything wrong with that. And then you might go ahead and eat the groundnut. I have a very practical example where I am. I met with an old professor who was telling me about this, that when they were young, they used to climb mango trees and pluck mangoes from people's farms. And then you go and see these fine mango trees, and then they would tie something on it, something with like a red band, and then or put a stone and pour something on it so that when you come and see it, you will not like to touch the fine. What I want from you on that question is there are three things there. So assuming this is going to carry 30 marks, so if you define sociology, culture very well sociologically, you get